This is Al McFarlane, host of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 98.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here. Glad to have you along as well. As always, we promise and we think we'll deliver what I call a robust conversation about topics of interest to you and to me and to us today. Today, I've got my friends, I call them my companions along, and we'll be talking about several issues. One topic is going to be about the status of Black women's leadership, and a couple of topics that have to do with the conflict in Gaza. Between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So I think you'll find it interesting. By the way, I'm going to be interviewing tomorrow the Israeli Consul General for the Midwest out of Chicago. And we're hoping to set up an ongoing open channel to parties of all sides expressing their truth, their story, and with the intent of giving you, the listener, the viewer, more information, more analysis, how you form your opinion and how your opinion can inform what our nation does, what America does, what the U.S. does in terms of its position on these critical concerns. Well, before I begin, I want to, as always, thank KFAI for being our partner and platform sponsoring the Tuesday edition of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. But I also want to invite you, KFAI listeners and friends and supporters, to support this program by going to our YouTube channel. It's YouTube.com/insightnewsalmcfarlane and become a subscriber. Subscribe, like, and share. Let your friends know, let everybody know that this conversation is going down right now and they should be a part of it. And if you are listening on KFAI or across any of the social media platforms, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter. If you are in any of those places, you can join the conversation. You join it by going to the comment section and letting us know that you like or dislike or want to add to or challenge an idea, a thought, a word that you're hearing that we're talking about. We'd love to have your reaction, your involvement. If you want to be on the program, send a note. The same place, and we'll figure out how to send a link over to you so that you could be live with us with your point of view as well. Well, with that, let me welcome my friends. Ndugu Yusef Mgeni is here from St. Paul. My friend, Dr. Irma McLaurin, is joining us from North Carolina, I believe. And my friend, Yoji Senna, joins us from Bahia in Brazil. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing?
Good.
Good. Well, let's start with Yusef. Talk about, I've got an echo coming from somewhere, but Yusef, why don't we have you lead into the first article that you sent to us for us to have a conversation about. It's an article from the, I think it's the
Nonprofit Quarterly.
Yeah. Talk about that. What's the article? What's the theme? And what we want to explore here?
Okay. The Nonprofit Quarterly is a quarterly publication that provides thoughtful information for people in the nonprofit sector. They have an article entitled "The State of Black Women Leadership is in Danger" in their November issue, written by the publisher of the Nonprofit Quarterly, Cindy Suarez. And if I may, I'd just like to read the opening paragraph, and then I want to turn it over to Dr. Irma, who I'm certain has more than a few reflections about the content of this article. And then I'd be happy to comment following her with some of my own reactions. The article focuses on a report from the Washington Area Women's Foundation, and the report is entitled "Thrive as They Lead, Advancing the Infrastructure to Support Black Women Leaders in the DC metro area nonprofit sector." And it begins by suggesting, quote, "We have observed a disconcerting pattern where Black women leaders are vacating their roles, with some leaving the nonprofit sector altogether, citing hostility toward their leadership, strain on their health and well-being, unfair job expectations, and limited opportunities for career progression." And this is the first glimpse of a funder tackling what might be one of the sector's biggest as yet untold stories, indeed a trend, the pushing out of Black women in leadership. And while Black women leaders are at the forefront of innovation, they are operating in unprecedented times with mounting barriers and challenges to their leadership, driven by systemic inequities deeply embedded in sectors and systems. Dr. Irma, your thoughts?
I was just typing a note saying that I had sent an article that I don't think has been published yet called Racialized Ageism. And it speaks to the fact that Black women disproportionately are underrepresented. We were at the forefront of leadership when we were younger, but as we age, we sort of disappear. And I think that what this article is speaking to, I don't know if anyone recalls, but last year, almost en masse, something like 3 or 4 Black women who were DEI professionals for Netflix, I think, and some other places,
Sure.
suddenly resigned. There is a pattern, and I think I sent this note to you, Yusef, that this is not new to me. I have worked in multiple sectors for the federal government, in the nonprofit sector for the Ford Foundation and Teach for America, as a university president, as a tenured faculty at 2 institutions. And I can tell you that the climate for Black women in particular is quite chilly and not supportive. And the consequences of that are poor health, or people just decide to leave these areas completely. So I'm not surprised at this. It's not new news. Harvard Business Review several years ago said that women, and Black women in particular, women of color, were actually at risk for doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. It's like, why did it take Harvard Business Review to tell you what we had been living and experiencing? So I'm not surprised at this study. It simply affirms what my own experience has been and what the data has already shown, is that we are put in these positions. We're not giving the support. We actually have it, and it's very difficult when you're dealing with young white staffers. Sometimes the CEO that you're reporting to is like 20 years younger than you. They have no experience. They're getting on-the-job training. And if you become critical of them, you become the problem. And we are then cast as angry Black women. I've been called that. And those of you who know me know that I don't walk around being angry.
It's also known, Irma, as the BBWS, the bitter Black woman syndrome.
And people get it's what therapists call transference. People project onto us their own insecurities, their own lack of professionalism, their lack of experience. And when we shine and show up and try and guide or provide or be collaborative and provide input, we become the problem. And so we're given these kinds of labels. And I can give you a clear example. When I worked at the Ford Foundation, a white colleague who I go to dinner with, we hang out, she came to me and said a new person had joined and she wanted to meet me, but she was afraid to approach me because she thought I was angry. And I said, based on what? She's never spoken to me. When I'm walking through the hallways, I speak to everyone. I'm usually smiling because I generally walk into work a fairly happy person, and I don't try to bring whatever issues are weighing on me into the workplace. And so this person had constructed a narrative about me. And what I said was, well, over the years, I've learned I don't own other people's stuff. This is her stuff. She's projecting it onto me. And, it's not my issue. My question is, what did you say? This is a colleague with whom I have had dinner with. We've gone out, we've done things together, we lived in the same neighborhood, and I was basically saying to her, what was your response? Because you could easily have said to that person, that's not the Dr. Irma I know. That's not the person I know. I've had, so maybe you should take the time to get to know her. So we are faced with people formulating stereotypes about us and then acting on those stereotypes without any real empirical data or interaction to back it up. And so I think this is not surprising, but it keeps happening. In 2017, I wrote an article on LinkedIn initially called, on being a Black woman in America, which got thousands of views, okay, on LinkedIn. And the point of it was really in response to a newspaper article by a young woman who said, I don't need to smile for you. That this young Black girl was being harassed in her high school because her counselor wanted her to look happy and smile. And when she didn't, she cast her as an angry young Black woman. And she's like, I don't have to smile for you. I'm not mad at anybody. But how is it that my smiling, makes the teacher comfortable? But it's not what the young woman wants to do. And so we're put into these categories, we're characterized, we're demonized, and it's always a negative. And it's not just white men, Black men, but also white women. And sometimes white women are the worst perpetrators of this. And what they do is that they play upon this angry Black woman or the strong Black woman. And I saw this happen to a colleague who was accused by a white colleague that she was scared of her. Now, the woman is not huge. She's not someone who's threatening, but all this young woman had to do was come up with white tears, right? What I call white girl drama, WGD, white tears, white girl drama. And suddenly this Black professional who had worked there for years found herself having to defend just being who she is, which is a Black woman. So I'm not surprised at this. And I think it has impacted leadership. And I think we're going to see fewer and fewer Black women. What they do is that they have what I call the escape hatch. It's either going to be a Blanquita, a white-skinned Latina. It's going to be a Southeast Asian. It's going to be somebody who's just not us. Or it's going to be someone whose ancestry is not rooted in this country. They can be Caribbean Black. They can be African. They can be first generation African born in the United States. As long as they are not a native born Black American, they're okay. And so it's painful. I've lived it. I've experienced it. And it's just painful to know that it's still going on and that people can see it, but they're not doing anything about it.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. That's the voice of Dr. Irma McLaurin, here with Ndugu Yusef Mgeni and Yoji Senna. Yoji is joining us from Bahia. Yusef, go ahead.
Well, Dr. Irma, it's hard to follow you. You've got so many facts, that one of the things I'm sure you've heard when you share facts with people in a leadership position is, I find that hard to believe.
Of course, yes.
And let me tell you what I believe, because I think it's important. This article, again, is entitled, The State of Black Women Leadership is in Danger. And it's in the November issue of the Nonprofit Quarterly. And you may be able to go to nonprofitquarterly.org and look up the article and gain access to it without having to subscribe to the publication. But it is truly an incredible article. My takeaway, Dr. Irma, Yoji, and Al, is that the contents of this article could easily be said about people of color of any gender, especially those in leadership roles, either in traditional white institutions, school districts, higher education, government, nonprofits, or community-based organizations. And historically, Black people have enjoyed access to leadership positions when cities, when governments, when school districts, when institutions were in such disarray that the real wonder was how they had remained standing long enough for a Black person to come into office and assume that position of leadership. And there are unreasonable expectations. There is a lack of trust. We are not given the benefit of the doubt.
And see, Yusef, I want to challenge you on that. This could be about anybody. It can't be about anybody, because other people of color are not demonized in the same way that Black women are. And I think to say that we enjoy the benefits is really sort of making it seem we have fought a hard struggle to get into those positions.
Yes, ma'am.
And when we get into those positions, we're not given on-the-job training. We're not given support. And then when other people of color come in, they're given support. They're allowed to make mistakes. There is a very, very limited tolerance for native-born Black Americans to do anything.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Moment, you know?
I think we're saying the same thing. And I'm saying that many people of color, not just Black people are the archetypal stereotype or example of what happens in this environment. And many of these environments are toxic and they are harmful. And believe me, as a Black man, I could identify with 99.9% of what the article highlighted as conditions and circumstances that Black women faced in leadership positions. Al, I know you can say much the same thing in terms of the leadership that you've experienced both in white and in Black institutions, navigating society. My point is simply that these are not just restricted solely to Black women, although Black women clearly may bear the brunt of the injury and the toxicity because of as you said, at one point, Black women were the standard bearers in these institutions, and not so much now. And many Black women are being forced out. We've seen it here locally, right here in the Twin Cities, in school districts, in higher education, at Hamline University, and in other institutions where Black women enjoyed significant support outside their institutions and very little from within. Yeah. So I'm just saying there are many, many similarities in this article with what other Black people and people of color have experienced and have recounted.
And I don't disagree with that. I think what I'm trying to make the point of is that the data they're presenting is that the impact, of course, any person who's oppressed is going to experience what is described, okay? Whether it's Black men, whether it's people of color, whether it's someone, who is gender fluid, all are going to experience that. But what the data is showing is that for Black women in particular, given our numbers, given the level of education, and we are disproportionately represented. If you look at Black Americans, Black women tend to finish college more. We tend to have more degrees. We are disproportionately underrepresented. And if there is some kind of clearing, okay, we're the first to go. My article that I think Al will be publishing soon on racialized ageism is making the point that if you look across the spectrum of older leaders now, you will find older white men, older white women, older Black men, and almost virtually no older Black women. We literally disappear at the age of 50. If you look at the data of Fortune 500s, okay, there was at one point 2 Black women. I think there's a woman now with Walgreens, and there was Ursula Burns who was with Xerox. And that was it. And now there's just one, and yet you see other groups making more headway. There are many more Latina women who are being represented in higher leadership. So the path is opening for some, but for Black women who have borne the brunt, who have actually struggled and created these openings for other people, we're not benefiting from them, at all.
So the question for me, Dr. Irma and Yusef and Yoji, is what do we do about it? What are we going to do about it? And the obvious thing is we can't depend on anybody other than us to bring the solution. The solution has to come from within, I believe, and now we both navigate and project and then protect our interest and use systems and strategies and policies to both keep resistance to the damage that is endemic, that is part of the process, the system, but also use systems, knowledge, and presence to shift and create avenues of advancement for us, both individually and collectively. What do you think, Irma? What are we going to do about it?
Well, this is one of the reasons that I began to coach, was to, one, I do both reinvention coaching, like if something goes sideways, how do you reinvent yourself? Because I've had to do that multiple times, including with the University of Minnesota. How do you reinvent yourself to be successful? And the second is what I call perform. And it is a strategy of getting women, Black women in particular, to begin to identify, one, to look at their workplace as a culture. What are the cultural values? And then how do you fit? There's a thing called Johari's window, which is like, how do people see you? What do they see? How do you see yourself? And what is unknown? What are the hidden things that may not be visible? And getting people to be more conscious that they're operating within a cultural milieu, and they need to be able to read the signs and create documentation that if people do come after them, and I can't tell you how many successful Black women that I've come across who suddenly have a young white woman staffer who decides that they don't like the way that they're being managed. And suddenly they have the ear of the CEO, they have the ear of the board, they have everybody's ear, and everyone's attention is turned to this young person, as opposed to the leader to say, well, can you help us understand what's going on? And so the assumption is always that the person who is usually a white person making the complaint is always right. And so we're put in the position of having to defend ourselves. And I think this occurs much more with Black women. And I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who have extraordinary capabilities and suddenly find themselves being accused, in these scenarios in which the person who's accusing them doesn't have the expertise, the credentials, but they have the believability, and that in some ways gets us to Kamala Harris. There have been a couple of articles about her in which they're talking about, I think I'm sort of working on a piece, In Search of Kamala Harris, like she just disappeared. And the other one is called The Kamala Harris Problem. We're always problematized. If she were a white woman, they would not be using that language about her, So she also becomes a sort of iconic representation of the ways in which Black women's leadership is being challenged. She's being scrutinized in a way that white male vice presidents were never scrutinized. They just kind of faded into the background and it was okay. Now people are asking, well, why isn't she doing this? And why isn't she doing that? And they have an expectation of her that they never had for a vice president. So I think she becomes emblematic of what's going on.
The article includes this paragraph. It says specifically 10 core themes emerged from the study. They all fall under the umbrella of, quote unquote, a fundamental absence of trust in their leadership, trust of Black women's leadership. The report explains this pervasive lack of trust materialized across multiple dimensions, including fundraising, board engagement, staff management, wellness policies, wherein their leadership and decision-making were constantly questioned, challenged, and undermined. And that's what you've been describing, Irma, is
Absolutely.
a process for marginalization and for questioning the value.
And the trust, but the way they framed it, I think
what does trust mean? That's the question. That's the
well. I think what we're saying. I think if we look at the elements of what they describe, which is about their decision making, their thing, they do not want to invest in supporting a Black woman who's usually 10 times better, because we have to be smarter, better, more rigorous in what we do, more innovative. And it's almost like, again, I think it is a projection. The lack of trust is in their ability to follow Black women's leadership, not in the Black woman, but in their ability that they then project onto that leader. And that is the question.
Or let me suggest this: the lack of trust is their belief that if they are genuinely affording the power associated with leadership, then their role by default, because of its inherent inadequacy, puts them out of the picture, and therefore they resist. Yusef, what do you think?
Let me take it a step further, Alan. I want Yoji to have a chance to get in, so I'll be brief. I want to say 4 things. First, I said earlier that, a common refrain is, I find that hard to believe. Anytime a person of color or a Black person in a leadership position advances innovation or thought, that basically denies you the benefit of the doubt. Okay, that's what trust is. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt, being open-minded, being willing to listen to them and think through and allow them to pursue an original idea. Number 2, in the 60s, we used to say, each one reach one, each one teach one. And when we're talking about what's necessary to break this cycle for Black people and people of color, the first responsibility, number 3, the first responsibility of leadership is to train your replacement. And so many times when Black people leave these positions, as Dr. Irma pointed out, they're replaced by somebody who doesn't bring that history, that experience, that knowledge, either of the constituents or the institution or the leadership challenges. And finally, what I have seen, the only thing that I have seen that has been successful, because you're not trusted by the philanthropic sector, you're not trusted by elected and appointed officials, you're not trusted by other community-based organizations who are not led by African Americans or people of color, and you're basically on a psychological island. Okay, Richard Wright said, the word Negro is not a name, it's a psychological island that must withstand all of the waves of oppression that batter against it. But what I have seen that has been successful is where groups that have a common interest form a support group of their own members, okay, where they can share their concerns, where they can talk about what has worked in different situations. And as Dr. Irma pointed out, this is a cross-generational issue, because I've been in discussions about reparations with young Black people where I have warned them that the check is not going to be in tomorrow morning's mail in the mailbox, that this is a vertical challenge, not a horizontal one. And they've told me, well, Elder Mgeni, you old folks need to get out of the way and sit down and shut up and let us young people take over, because we're on top of it. We're 100% and we're moving,
And of course, the irony of that is that they don't know what they don't know. And we know a lot. And this is one of the reasons I just came back from the American Anthropological Association conference in Toronto. And the only thing I participated in, because I don't want to hear anybody give another paper, was the mentoring session. And when it came time for that to end, I said, well, I'm going to be in the bar. So anybody who wants to continue this conversation, just follow me. And we sat and held conversation for almost 5 hours in that corner. Because what I'm saying is that I think I have wisdom. And if you have an issue, let me see if I can help you learn how to navigate that. I've worked in so many different multiple sectors. I want to be able to share that. That's why
replacements.
Yes. And to coach people and encourage. And so, I'm on the road to getting someone at an institution where their department has been, really problematic. They just got a unanimous vote to move to the next level of full professor. I'd like to believe that Makeda is the director of UROC, because I encouraged her even after I left to go back to school to get her degree, and to continue that support, even though I was no longer affiliated with the institution. I was invested in her development, whether it was going to be at UROC or someplace else. So I maintain ties and networks across both Liberia, across the ocean, as well as just around the corner. And I'm people will tell you all the time. I'll just see people and say, "Hey, let me take you to dinner," and just pick up the tab and have the conversation. What's on your mind? But I think you're right. I would like to, there used to be leadership institutes for women, and it was mostly white women who benefited. I think it was either Wellesley or Yale. Somebody had this thing for professionals. I think we need to have more of those at professional organizations. One of the things I funded at Ford was for the National Women's Studies Association to continue to have a women of color leadership development. And as a result of that, virtually every president since that grant was given in 2006 has been a Black or woman of color. And I was just on a panel recently where Beverly Guy Shefto from Spelman stopped and said, I want everyone to know that the reason we're here and able to have these kinds of panels is because Dr. McLaurin funded NWSA to do some organizational development.
There's also ABFE, ABFE, the Association
yes.
of Black Foundation Executives.
Exactly.
Same
and so
thing.
that's, I think those organizations, because we don't know what institutions are going to do. If they're publicly funded, they become very hamstrung in terms of what they can and can't do. They've got to yield to certain pressures. So my vision was to support the professional organizations, which are outside of the institutions, that make them stronger, encourage them to create, endowments so that they have the resources, and to have, there used to be summer institutes. It was it Kresge that funded a whole institute to train Black people in development. And there were a lot of Black women who went through that. So it's ironic that in philanthropy, where there was all this investment in the development of Black women's leadership, that we're disappearing. I mean, that's the irony. It's not like the talent isn't there. It's that they're not hiring us.
Let me acknowledge Gwen Bookman, who's listening or watching online. She says, and Gwen, thank you for your comment. She says it's hard to get across the unique impact of intersectionality as it relates to Black women's experiences and situations of both racism and sexism. So let's come back and deal with that. But before we do, Yoji, let's bring you into the conversation. How does it look from where you stand in Bahia, in Brazil?
Well, I think here, as far as Black women leadership, it's in a different historical time. It's right here. Here is in the upswing where they are taking positions of leadership and being visible. So I don't think that that conversation has yet to Brazil about Black women, because just right now they are having access to positions of leadership. But what I have to say is, and I feel that is what is replicating here. It was told to me on my classes on the subject of race that there was in the corporate America, there was some kind of a scale, right, to reach those quotas of diversity, and in a certain way, Black women always was the first choice, right, in a certain way, and I, for example, Dr. Irma mentioned that the times they choose Black people that are from outside of the United States or the first generation born. I myself, I always felt those symptoms they describe apply to Black women, apply to me as a Black man and immigrant, Black immigrant, male immigrant in the U.S. In a certain way, the lack of trust in crucial moments, or finding some ceiling that when you hit it or reach it, you are discarded. So, but here, the situation of Black women to me seems to be more auspicious, because right now this transformation that happened in the U.S. a few decades ago, it's happening now here. Right now we are, for example, quotas, racial quotas in universities and things like that. It's somehow recent, it was revised this year, and even in certain way adjusted to be more uh, optimist, or giving more protections. So might be something that might come in the year. But I now here, I also detect this difference in position of leadership to be towards uh, black women. So when you see the visibility of black people in here in Brazil in position of power, what you see are black women, right? Being ministers of federal government, being CEOs of companies, academics. In certain way, here we are in a different. But
Irma, what do you think
I
that means on
would
a global
I
scale?
think,
say
I think
agree
Brazil
with
is in a honeymoon phase. Yeah, I think we will
yes,
see that. And I think the question is what needs to be done to protect these women so that it continues and it doesn't just evaporate after like 5 years. Okay. I want to just read you a headline. This is four Black women diversity and inclusion executives exit role. This was July 2023, and it was about Hollywood. So on June 20th, Disney's chief diversity officer and senior VP announced that it would be exiting her role. Then Netflix first ever head of inclusion would be leaving her role. Then Warner Brothers announced that the DI executive Karen Horn and Janelle English would be leaving their role. So you have four Black women who in 1 month in these major corporations are gone. So I think Brazil is kind of at a honeymoon stage where Black women, of course, and some of it too is gender politics. Women sometimes are seen as less threatening than Black men. So let's also be mindful that it's not just about women's expertise and their experience and, that they've paid their dues or that they've been the activists. All of that is true. Okay. And the and is sometimes the gender politics. And I think certainly that has happened to me where people assume that because I am a woman, I'm going to be someone that they can push around or someone who's going to be more willing to concede. And so I tell people, you didn't read my resume, obviously, but there are some assumptions around gender that make people feel that women may be more palatable when we don't perform in that way. And I've seen this happen with Asian women who don't perform Asian, sort of passiveness that they expect, then they begin to demonize us, right? We suddenly become angry and difficult to deal with. And, it's about our tone and it's, and these are very intangible things. There's nothing empirical, but suddenly our qualities, our characteristics, how, people say they don't know me, how I carry myself, or people hear in the way I speak that I'm being condescending. I mean, what people are able to project on us is utter amazement. And I want to take a moment to shout out to Gwen Bookman because she's from Durham, North Carolina. She just phoned me and I sent her a text that said, I'm live on this show and sent her the link. She teaches at Bennett College for Women, which is a Black women's college, one of two CUs, and Bennett and Spelman is the other. There they are developing leadership. And I think there is something to be said for single sex for women colleges where, I came through an all-girls high school and the kind of support and the sense of confidence that I could do anything, I carried with me into college. And I ran up against walls where people were expecting me to just kind of concede. And I was not socialized in that way. I was socialized to be a leader. I was socialized to be like editor of the yearbook as a sophomore. And because of that, I was not going to let someone tell me I couldn't do something. And I think having that kind of space, whether it's institutions, you asked Al for solutions. I think we do need Black women's leadership institutes that help us understand how to navigate these situations when they arise, because it's a politic. And with every politic, there are patterns. And if you structure it in such a way, you can find out how to navigate those patterns in such a way that it makes it very difficult for them to try and get rid of you. but you've got to be very conscious that you're in a very politicized environment. It's not about you're wonderful and great, because of course we are wonderful and great and brilliant, but we are also in highly politicized spaces. And whether it's in the nonprofit sector, whether it's in the academic sector, these are still highly politicized spaces. And we need to make sure we have a network outside. You know, I taught leadership education for the federal government. And the first thing I would ask people is, do you have at least 3 people outside of your spouse or partner, your best friend, your family that you can talk to and connect to? And someone once asked me, well, does my dog count? I said, no, because it can't give you feedback. But you need to have a support system where you can pick up the phone and you can bounce ideas off. If you don't have that, then use the professional money to hire a coach, you know, because a coach can give you that sort of stand back and look at what you're doing. They're not invested in the organization, so they have no skin in the game for that. And so I think coaching, some institutions, when I was at the University of Minnesota, they actually required all senior executives to have a coach. And I think that rather than a mentor, which can be kind of a personal relationship, and sometimes it can get kind of funky, but I think a coaching relationship is that. And so when I was at Shaw, I called up my coach from Minnesota, Dr. Earlene Belton, and had her come and sort of support me. She said, Irma, I believe in you. I'll come, just pay my expenses, to help me see if what I was seeing in this environment was right.
She's a real soldier.
Exactly. And we both recognize it, there were some issues there. So as the rest, as they say, is history. I won't say any more. But my point is that when I was teaching leadership education to senior federal executives, we were looking at articles that said the person who took over Microsoft, like one of the big departments, he had a coach. So coaching is something that people need to look at because it gives you a sounding board. And that sounding board doesn't have the same investment. And like I say, I go to the professional organizations, not to listen to papers, but to be there as a resource and to be able to depart and share the knowledge that I've accumulated over all these years.
And if you can't afford a coach, it's the posse or the support group or the group that meets in the corner of the bar to share
That's
their
right.
horror stories and plan success strategies is a viable alternative, particularly for people, young people on the leadership track on the way up. You really need that, because if you're in a majority culture institution, it can be very unhealthy. Okay.
Yes.
In many situations. And I won't go into personal experience. I'm 6'6" tall, Irma, and weigh 300 pounds. And Black women were my mentors and supporters who told me from a very early age, boy, if you don't get an education and become a credit to the race and bring that education back to the Black community and use it, we're going to whoop your butt. Okay. And they meant it, and I produced. Okay.
And I would say for people who can't, and I think that is absolutely right, for people who cannot afford a coach, that's why the professional organizations, because they often have mentoring sessions, people meet informally. I received the Ira E. Harrison Legacy Award from the Association of Black Anthropologists, and I'm very proud to have been a recipient of that. But I talked about remembering Ira as that person who'd say, here, let me buy you a glass of wine. And they would sit and impart, how's it going with tenure? How's it going with this? And give you the benefit of their knowledge and expertise and let you know that if you really needed some help, you could pick up the phone and call them. And so I think having those resources, even if it's not a paid coach, there are ways in which you can find people to coach you. In that sense, in the professional who understands what's going on in that profession.
And in conclusion, I'm reminded that Al and I started.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane, and I'm talking with Dr. Irma and Brother Yusef Mgeni and Brother Yoji Senna. Before you go on, Yusef, I wanted to sort of tying into this conversation, nod back to an approach you were leading and talking about the experience of people of color And it brought to mind an interview that I did with Samantha Vang, who, and this goes back to the question of what do we do, Dr. Irma McLaurin. Samantha Vang talked about the emergence of people of color in the Minnesota State Legislature. And even though it's not a lot, the numbers feel like a lot because a lot of people went to the House of Representatives and now to the Senate, with Bobby Joe Champion being the president of the Senate. So the numbers are exponentially greater, and they are taking key positions on key committees. Samantha Vang is on farming, for example. So she said that, we are here and we are attacking the budget in ways that reflect our own communities and cultural sensibilities, and that we know that our job is to provide massive resources to our communities, because fixing our communities means fixing the state of Minnesota. And so that's where I come from with the question of what do we do? How do we leverage? How do we network? And we build ways to find the money, use the money, get the money to grow capacity, capability, and wealth in our community.
I don't think it takes money, Al. I would say that what Bobby Joe, and I remember Bobby Joe before he got elected, what they can do is have a summer camp. They can use the facility at URock. It's free. Begin to support and educate young people around what it means to create policy, have them understand how do you get into these situations? What does it take to launch a campaign? I mean, there are things that you can do, begin to have these summer institutes. Makeda told me that at one point, one of the reasons she got into writing was because the university used to have writing camps, in the community. So you have a space there at the Urban League, you have URock, you have the potential. And I think, Yusef, you were going to talk about the leadership program that you and Al started. I think we need to resurrect those kinds of things, because I think what Black students and students of color are going to be able to do inside schools is going to become very limiting. They're already being targeted for setting up like Black history programs, right? Mm-hmm. They're being targeted so we need to give them alternative spaces. Like we used to have the New Africa schools and the Saturday academies. I think we have to resurrect those kinds of institutions and begin to cultivate the same way that they used to have the summer for people going in the civil rights movement. They would have these summer programs to train them how to operate in those spaces. I think we have to resurrect those. Absolutely.
Freedom schools.
Yeah, freedom schools. I think we have to resurrect freedom schools, Saturday academies, the New Africa, schools, so that we're giving them an alternative parallel education. And you said we were going to talk about the leadership stuff that you all had started in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Where is it now? Maybe we need to resurrect that as well.
Let's pivot. We've got about 15 minutes left for the program, 10 minutes or so. And Yusef, you had supplied a couple of other articles for us to think about. One was an opinion piece, and the other was entitled, "Who Will Run Gaza After the War?" I think both come from the Washington Post. What were your impressions? What were your thoughts when you read them? What do we want to talk about, and how do we want to approach these conversations?
Well, there were two issues related to Palestine. The first, who will take over the day after? And the New York Times recently published an article pointing out that the Netanyahu administration had been funding Hamas for about 18 years and to maintain the status quo quietly and sort of under the covers. The other article dealt with the fact that as part of its occupation of Gaza, the Israeli Defense Force is bulldozing monuments, destroying libraries, historical documents. They demolished what is believed to be, and I can't pronounce the name of it, the third oldest Christian church in civilization. And it's understandable, according to the article, that amid the horrors carried out over the past 50 plus days, preserving objects and buildings and documents might not be seen as important as protecting innocent life. But the preservation of culture and history is part and parcel of protecting a people and their spirit. And if Israel continues to destroy Gaza's cultural heritage with impunity, that all of humanity loses. And without water, without food, without medicine, without hospitals, healthcare, without internet, without all of the other daily factors of life, when we talk about who is going to run Gaza, will it be the Palestinian Authority? Will it be Hamas? Will it be some Arab designated group? Or will it be some democratically elected group from within? It's a critical question that I think a lot of people are raising. And the Palestinian Authority is perceived by the powers that be as the lesser of many evils because the Palestinian Authority runs the West Bank. While there are concerns about the current 88-year-old leadership of that organization, they are prepared to step in and assume responsibility. The sad part of the destruction of Gaza by the Israeli Defense Forces was put best by the Pope, who said an act of terror should not result in a response of terror. And I think that the massive destruction of more than 6,000 buildings, more than 15,000 lives, and the continued occupation of Gaza by the Israeli Defense Force is not going to provide the foundation for ongoing peace talks or stabilization in the Middle East, and in fact runs the risk of just the opposite, recruiting Israeli opponents for generations to come and exacerbating the current tensions that exist in Jordan, in Egypt, in the surrounding countries around Palestine that may lead to could lead to an international escalation of violence and military intervention. So who's going to lead Gaza after the Israeli occupation? What is going to happen if the continued destruction of the cultural artifacts of the Palestinian people continues? Bulldozers continue to topple monuments and museums, and the Gaza Public Library. That really is what many people consider an unacceptable violation of international law. And
Let me tell people
Brother
you're referring
Mgeni,
to two articles, both in the Washington Post. One, Destroying Gaza's Cultural Heritage is a Crime Against Humanity. That's the title. It's an opinion piece by writer Karen Attiah. And that was published December 1st. And the second article that you're referring to, Who Will Run Gaza After the War, also in the Washington Post. And it's a piece written by Michael Birnbaum, William Booth, and Hazim Balusha, appearing December 3rd in the Washington Post. Yoji, you get a comment?
yes, I think this question is how very simplistic. In certain way, first I would say there is gonna be continue to be Hamas or something now in place as far as extremism of ideology. And remember, what is the PLA today, or the Palestinian Authority? Used to be the oil that would be same, um, you know, adjectives as applied to Hamas today. So I don't think also that this struggle, this issue that's happening right now is gonna end soon. One day they're gonna be declared like was done once by the U.S. in Afghanistan or in Iraq. That is done. So the thing is lingering, and this is grave enough to. It's gonna be impossible. The idea, for example, that Hamas is gonna be eliminated, as I said, probably they might eliminate all the living members if they have a roster, but it's gonna come out something more virulent than Hamas, right? And the virulence of Hamas has been in a certain way not appear from out of nowhere, right? In many ways, the policy of the state of Israel has been always being aggressive towards the Palestinians. Since I'm from Brazil, Brazil is in many ways involved in that presently in a secondary way because there is many Brazilian Israelis and Brazilian Palestinians. But the creation of the state Israel was spearheaded by a Brazilian diplomat called Osvaldo Aranha in 1948, with the ability of the Brazilian diplomacy, because it's one of the positive attributes that the state of Brazil have, that is have an international respected diplomatic corps. So in that, in the inception of the state Israel, that was in certain way weaved with the leadership of the ambassador Osvaldo Aranha. He has streets and plazas and monuments in Israel been commemorating his leadership. He recommended since 1948 the coexistence of two states, a Palestinian and an Israeli. So, and this is what's crucial. That is, you cannot think about what's going to happen, who's going to govern Gaza after that, if without changing the status quo of really establishing a Palestinian state with equal foot as the Israeli state, right?
Was there ever a Palestinian state established, Yoji?
Say it again?
Was there ever a formal Palestinian state established?
Yeah, now the only pass after this war, what's going to happen, who's going to govern after this war, I don't know how it's going to end. It is the Israel accept the creation of a Palestinian state, as well the Arabs accept the existence of Israel. And then democratic elections. But this also, I think, is going to take decades, if not a generation or more, to happen. But the only solution in this moment, and what caused we are being in this situation, it's not Israel and the UN respect its own resolution when the state of Israel was created. That has to be created, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine.
What a lot of people don't realize, Yoji, is that when Israel was created as part of a former British colony in Palestine, it occupied 12% of the country. Today, it occupies 82% of the country. And that is the primary and underlying reason for the tension. And in South Africa, people forget that the African National Congress, the constitution of the ANC, was in fact the constitution of the NAACP with ANC substituted. And in 1956, the African National Congress voted to accept, the reality that it was only through armed liberation struggle that they were going to gain independence from white South Africans. And
I would add to.
Could I just add a point about the destruction of cultural heritage? There are two ways in which, when people want to erase, governments want to erase a people, they destroy their patrimony, their history, right? Mm-hmm. And rape. These are two ways. Women's bodies are seen as kind of a symbol of the nation state. So we know that from human rights stuff that, under these extreme circumstances, raping women becomes one way, and the other is the destruction of cultural heritage. We as Black Americans know what it means to have our cultural heritage erased. And that's what we're seeing. And the world has to stand up and say something.
We also
let me remind people that tomorrow at 1:00, our live stream is going to include a brief and beginning interview with the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. His name is Yunam Cohen. He's a career diplomat, 16 years of experience in the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we'll be talking about the conflict that we're talking about today. Well, listen, we're out of time. Thank you, Irma, Dr. Irma McLaurin. Thank you, Ndugu Yusef Mgeni, and thank you, Brother Yoji Senna, joining us from Bahia. I'm Al McFarlane, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Al.
Yes.